I never saw it coming. Not in the 8 years we were together, not in the quiet mornings where he'd kiss me before work, not in the late nights when he whispered, "I love you," as he crawled into bed. Our life was ordinary in the best way, our little home, our beautiful child, the shared dreams we built together. And then, with one cruel revelation, everything shattered. It started with a whisper in my mind, something was off. Maybe it was the way he had started guarding his phone like a lifeline, or how he suddenly became meticulous about his appearance. But I ignored it. Because when you trust someone with your soul, you don't question their loyalty. Then, I found the truth. A simple mistake, one wrong screenshot, one stray email, sent my entire world crumbling. The messages were right there. Words of love, plans of escape, gifts bought with our money for her. My husband, my partner, the father of my child, had been living another life behind my back. And the worst part? He wasn't even sorry. When I confronted him, I expected shock, regret, maybe even panic. But all I got was cold indifference. He didn't deny it. He didn't try to explain. He just sat there, his face void of emotion, while I stood before him, unraveling. I screamed. I begged. I demanded to know why. And he said, because I wanted to. That was it. No excuses, no apologies. Just that. I felt my knees buckle, my breath shorten. 8 years, wasted. My love, mocked. Our child, discarded like an afterthought. I wanted to disappear, to curl into myself and fade away. The betrayal was a poison in my veins, and I couldn't live with it. But then, my child called my name. Their tiny voice, filled with innocence, with love, with need. And suddenly, I knew. I couldn't leave. Not yet. The next morning, I woke up to an empty bed. It wasn't unusual, he had been avoiding me since the confrontation. Still, the silence was suffocating. I moved through the house like a ghost, my body going through the motions, making breakfast, dressing my child, answering their endless questions with a hollow smile. But inside, I was unraveling. My hands shook when I reached for my coffee. My breath came in short, shallow gasps. I kept replaying our conversation in my head, over and over, like some sick, twisted loop. Because I wanted to. No regret. No shame. Just pure selfishness. That was the moment I realized, this wasn't the man I married. Maybe he never was. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my phone. I had every piece of evidence I needed. I could ruin him if I wanted to. I could send screenshots of his affair to his boss, his family, his friends. I could make sure everyone knew what kind of man he truly was. But would it change anything? Would it make him sorry? Would it make the ache in my chest go away? I heard my child giggling from the living room, completely unaware of the storm brewing inside me. They needed me. That was the only thing keeping me from slipping too far into the darkness. But God, the darkness was tempting. The front door opened. My heart lurched. He walked in like nothing had happened. As if I hadn't spent the entire night crying, as if he hadn't destroyed our life, as if we were just another happy family on a regular day. I watched him move, watched the way he avoided my eyes, the way he tossed his keys onto the counter like he owned the place. My hands curled into fists. I wanted to scream at him, throw things, tear into him the way he had torn into my soul. Instead, I whispered, "Where were you?" He didn't answer right away. He just shrugged, pulling off his jacket. Shrugged. Like I was nothing. Like our child was nothing. Like 8 years of marriage were nothing. I stood up so fast my chair scraped against the floor. "You don't get to do this," I said, my voice trembling. "You don't get to pretend everything is normal." He finally looked at me. There was no remorse in his eyes. No guilt. Just annoyance. "I told you. It's over. Get over it." I felt something inside me snap. I wanted to hurt him. I wanted him to feel the pain that was swallowing me whole. But then, a tiny hand tugged at my shirt. "Mommy? Are you okay? My child. My lifeline." I swallowed down the scream clawing its way up my throat. "I'm fine, sweetheart," I whispered, forcing a smile. But I wasn't fine. I was drowning. And the worst part? He didn't even care. That night, I sat on the bathroom floor, staring at a bottle of pills. The label blurred as fresh tears burned my eyes. My hands trembled as I twisted the cap off, the plastic clicking open too easily. I had been strong for so long. Too long. I was tired. Tired of the lies. Tired of waking up every morning with a hole in my chest. Tired of pretending I was okay when I wasn't. The world would keep spinning without me. He would move on with his mistress, happy and untouched by the damage he left behind. And my child. My breath hitched. My child would wake up in the morning and call for me. They would run to my bed, expecting warmth and safety, and instead, they would find cold, lifeless silence. No. I squeezed my eyes shut, pressing my fists against my temples as the sobs ripped through me. I couldn't do it. Not while my child still needed me. Not while I was the only person in this world who would protect them from him. I crawled toward the toilet and hurled the pill bottle inside. My whole body shook as I flushed, watching as my weakness disappeared down the drain. But the darkness wasn't gone. It clung to me like a second skin, whispering in my ear, reminding me that I was alone. That he had one. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Instead, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of my home, the creaks in the walls, the hum of the heater, the soft, steady breathing of my child in the next room. But the house felt different now. It wasn't a home anymore. It was just a place where I existed. A place where I had been discarded like a forgotten object. And he was still here. Sleeping peacefully downstairs, completely unbothered by what he had done. My jaw clenched. This wasn't fair. I had been faithful. I had been loving. I had given him everything. And in return, he had destroyed me. I couldn't keep living like this. I wouldn't. Slowly, I sat up. My body was weak, but my mind was awake, more awake than it had been in weeks. If he thought he could walk all over me and leave unscathed, he was wrong. I wasn't going to disappear. I was going to fight. And I was going to make him regret ever thinking I was weak. Morning came like a slap to the face. The sunlight streamed through the blinds, warm and golden, but I felt nothing. My body was numb. My mind was raw. I stood in the kitchen, gripping a coffee mug with white-knuckled fingers as I listened to the sounds of my child playing in the next room. Their laughter, once my greatest joy, now felt like a cruel reminder of everything I had to protect. I heard the footsteps before I saw him. He strolled in like nothing had happened, stretching, yawning, running a hand through his hair like he was still the man I had loved. Like he wasn't a liar, a traitor, a monster. I didn't look at him. But I felt him. The weight of his presence pressed against my skin like a sickness, a slow-spreading rot. "Morning," he muttered, moving toward the fridge. I swallowed back the bile rising in my throat. Morning. How dare he say it so casually? How dare he act as if the world hadn't shifted? As if he hadn't burned our life to the ground and expected me to sweep up the ashes? I finally turned to face him, my voice quiet but sharp. "You need to leave." He didn't even flinch. He grabbed the milk, poured himself a glass, and took a slow sip before answering. "Not happening." I gritted my teeth, my nails biting into my palms. "This is my house." "Our house," he corrected, setting the glass down. "And I have just as much right to be here as you do." My breath came in short, sharp bursts. He was playing games. He wanted a reaction. And for the first time, I didn't want to give him one. I exhaled through my nose, forcing my hands to unclench. He wants control. He thrives on it. He expects me to crumble. Fine. Let him think I was crumbling. Let him think I was too weak to fight back. Because while he played his game, I was planning mine. I turned away from him, my voice dangerously calm. You'll regret this. He chuckled under his breath, shaking his head. Always so dramatic. I didn't answer. I just walked away. But inside, I was already setting things in motion. Because if he wanted to make my life a nightmare, I was about to return the favor. And I wouldn't stop until he was the one begging to leave. He thought I would break. He thought I would cry in the corner while he paraded around like nothing had changed. But I wasn't the same woman I had been before. The old me was gone, the one who forgave too easily, who overlooked the red flags, who believed in the goodness of a man who had none. The new me? She was cold. Calculated. And she was going to make him suffer. I started small. Things he wouldn't notice at first. I accidentally washed his favorite shirt with bleach, turning it into a streaky disaster. When he complained, I smiled sweetly and told him, "Guess you'll have to wear something else when you see her." I unplugged the Wi-Fi router every night before bed, forcing him to use his data. He cursed under his breath, pacing around the house like a caged animal. Then, I locked him out of our streaming accounts, one by one. Netflix. Hulu. Spotify. I changed the passwords and watched as his irritation grew. Petty? Absolutely. Satisfying? You have no idea. But I wasn't just playing games. I was building my escape. Every moment he spent under my roof was an insult. Every second I had to breathe the same air as him was a reminder of what he had done. And I refused to let my child grow up in a house filled with this kind of poison. So I met with a lawyer. I gathered every text, every receipt, every piece of evidence of his betrayal. I wasn't just going to kick him out. I was going to erase him from my life. And when I was done, he wouldn't even exist in this home anymore. One night, I woke up to the sound of the front door closing. I sat up, my pulse pounding. It was 2 a.m. He had been sneaking out. I crept to the window and peeked through the blinds. His car idled in the driveway, the glow of his phone lighting up his face. I didn't need to see the screen to know who he was texting. Her. My stomach twisted, but I didn't let the pain take over. I just watched. Watched him drive away. Watched the man I had given everything to run straight into someone else's arms like I had never mattered. I clenched my fists. Let him go. Because when he came back, he would have no idea what was waiting for him. He thought he had the upper hand. But I was about to remind him exactly who he was dealing with. The morning after he snuck out, he strolled into the house like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't left in the dead of night to be with her. I sat at the kitchen table, sipping my coffee, waiting. He dropped his keys onto the counter, stretching lazily. Morning. I smiled. Smiled. His eyes flickered with suspicion, but he shrugged it off and walked past me, reaching for the fridge. You must be tired, I mused, setting my cup down. Late night? His hand paused on the fridge door. For the first time, he hesitated. I could almost hear the gears in his head turning, scrambling for a lie. Work stuff, he said finally. Work stuff. I almost laughed. I leaned back in my chair, studying him like he was a bug under glass. He didn't know that I had already checked his phone records. He didn't know that I had seen the Uber receipt in his email, showing exactly where he had gone. To her house. And he thought he could stand here and lie to my face. I could have thrown the evidence at him right then and there. Could have screamed, cried, demanded to know why he was still playing this game when we both knew the truth. But I didn't. Because this wasn't about him anymore. This was about winning. So I took a slow sip of my coffee and smiled again. Oh. Must have been important. He nodded quickly, relieved that I hadn't pushed. I stood up, brushing past him. Well, don't worry, I said softly. Everything's being taken care of. I didn't elaborate. I didn't need to. Because while he was sneaking off to be with his mistress, I had been securing my future. That morning, I finalized everything with my lawyer. I had proof of his affair. Proof that he had been spending our money on her instead of his own family. And with that evidence, I had built a rock-solid case. The divorce papers were ready. And the best part? The house was mine. He had no legal claim to it. I had double-checked, triple-checked every loophole. All I had to do was wait for the right moment to strike. Because soon, he would be the one packing his bags. And when he walked out that door, it would be for the last time. I spent the next few days watching him. Not in a way that he would notice. No, that would ruin the fun. I just observed. Studied the way he moved, the way he still tried to act like nothing had changed. He'd scroll through his phone with that smug little smirk, probably texting her, thinking I was none the wiser. He still ate the food I bought, slept in the bed I had washed, let our child climb into his lap like he wasn't a ghost of a father who had already checked out. But I didn't say a word. I let him think he was winning. Because the moment you make a man like him comfortable, that's when you take everything. It happened on a Saturday. He was getting dressed to go out, no doubt to see her, when I struck. I walked into the bedroom, leaned against the doorframe, and tilted my head. Got a second? He barely glanced at me as he checked his reflection. Make it quick. I smiled. I was just wondering, where exactly do you plan on staying tonight? That made him pause. He turned, raising an eyebrow. What? I held up an envelope, the divorce papers, thick and final. His smirk vanished. What the hell is that? He asked, his voice sharp. I tossed it onto the bed between us. Your eviction notice. His face darkened. You can't kick me out. Oh, but I can, I said, my voice calm. You see, this house? It's mine. Your name isn't on it. Your name isn't on anything, actually. And now that I've filed for divorce, you don't have a leg to stand on. He picked up the papers, flipping through them, his jaw tightening with every page. You've been planning this, he muttered. I didn't deny it. You didn't think I'd just sit back and let you humiliate me, did you? I took a step closer, lowering my voice. You threw away this marriage. You threw away me. And now, you get to live with the consequences. His eyes burned with anger, but there was something else underneath. Panic. I had taken him by surprise. He thought I'd break. He thought I'd beg. Instead, I had outplayed him. I turned to leave, but paused at the door. Oh, and just so you know, if you try to fight this, I have copies of everything. Every text. Every hotel receipt. Every dime you spent on her instead of your child. I met his eyes, tilting my head. So go ahead. Make this ugly. It'll only end worse for you. Silence. I could hear his breath coming in sharp, uneven bursts. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt free. Because this wasn't just my pain anymore. It was his, too. The silence in the house was different now. Before, it had been suffocating, a reminder of the betrayal, the lies, the slow unraveling of everything I had built. But now, it felt like the calm before a storm. I knew he was plotting something. I could feel it. Maybe it was the way he avoided looking at me when he picked up our child. Maybe it was the hushed phone calls I overheard when he thought I wasn't listening. Maybe it was just my gut, screaming at me that something wasn't right. And then, I found out. It was late when I got the message. A mutual friend. Someone who had been watching from the sidelines, waiting for the right moment to step in. You need to see this. Attached was a screenshot. A message thread. between him and his mistress. And in it, clear as day, was their plan. He wanted full custody. Not because he wanted to be a father. No, that had never been a priority for him. He wanted to hurt me. He wanted to take the only thing keeping me alive. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the messages, my breath coming in sharp, shallow gasps. I'll make her look crazy. She's unstable. She'll break eventually. I dropped my phone. For a moment, the world blurred. He wasn't just trying to leave me. He was trying to destroy me. I gripped the edge of the table, steadying myself. No. Not this time. He had already taken so much. He would not take my child. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I gathered everything. Every message. Every email. Every bank statement showing the money he had spent on her instead of his own family. I contacted my lawyer. I contacted his lawyer. And by morning, the papers were filed. Not just for divorce. Not just for custody. But for full parental rights. And when he walked in later that evening, expecting me to crumble, expecting me to be weak, I simply handed him the documents. His face went pale as he flipped through them. His voice wavered. You can't do this. I tilted my head. Watch me. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I saw it. Fear. Not mine. His. Because he had finally realized. I wasn't the one losing everything. He was. He didn't speak at first. His eyes darted across the pages, his hands tightening around the stack of documents as if he could will them out of existence. You can't do this, he said again, but this time, his voice wasn't as sure. It wasn't as smug. And that's when I knew, he was panicking. I crossed my arms, keeping my tone even. Actually, I can. And I already did. He shook his head, a humorless laugh escaping him. This is insane. The court won't just. I cut him off. The court will see the proof. The financial records, the affair, the abandoned responsibilities. I let my words settle. They'll see exactly what kind of man you are. His jaw clenched. I'm still their father. Are you? I raised an eyebrow. Because a real father doesn't disappear for weekends with his mistress while his children wonder where he is. A real father doesn't use his kids as weapons to hurt their mother. His mouth opened, then closed. He had no argument, and he knew it. I leaned in, lowering my voice. You didn't just cheat on me. You cheated on them. That one hit its mark. His entire body went rigid, his face twisting with something ugly, rage, regret, or maybe just the realization that he had finally lost control. I should have felt bad. I didn't. Because this was the moment I had been waiting for. This was the moment where the man who had thought he was untouchable, who had smirked at my pain, dismissed my tears, treated me like I was nothing, finally realized he was the one with nothing left. That night, he packed a bag. Not all his things. Not yet. But enough. Enough to tell me he knew he had lost. He hovered in the doorway, gripping the strap of his duffel bag like it was an anchor. This isn't over, he muttered. I tilted my head. No, it is. And then, for the first time in weeks, I turned my back on him. And I didn't look back. The house was quiet after he left. Not the suffocating, heavy silence that had haunted me before, but something different. Something peaceful. I sat in the dimly lit living room, staring at the door he had walked out of for the last time, waiting for the weight in my chest to crush me. But it didn't. Instead, there was a lightness. A strange, unfamiliar sense of relief. Because I had one. Not in a petty, vengeful way, not in the way he had tried to break me just to prove that he could. No, I had won myself back. For the first time in years, I wasn't fighting for his love, for his approval, for some scraps of attention he barely even noticed I needed. I wasn't waiting for the next betrayal, the next lie, the next hollow excuse. It was over. Truly, finally over. He tried to fight me in court. Of course he did. Men like him don't accept defeat easily. He tried to paint me as bitter, as unstable, as a woman so consumed by anger that I was trying to ruin him. But the judge saw through it. Because I didn't have to lie. I didn't have to twist reality or rewrite history. I just had to show them the truth. And in the end, the truth was enough. The custody agreement was settled in my favor. His visits were limited. He could still see his child, but only under terms that protected them, protected me. And him? The man who had once held all the power. He was left scrambling. Living out of a rented apartment, balancing child support payments with the financial mess he had created for himself, realizing that his new life wasn't the fantasy he had dreamed it would be. His mistress? She got exactly what she wanted. And exactly what she deserved. Because sooner or later, she saw the truth too. She saw the laziness. The irresponsibility. The way he expected the world to revolve around him without ever lifting a finger to earn it. She saw what I had spent years trying to fix. And just like he had discarded me when I was no longer his perfect little wife, she discarded him when he was no longer her exciting little secret. The last time I saw him, months later, he looked different. Older. Tired. Defeated. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something I never thought I would. Nothing. Not hate. Not anger. Not sadness. Just, nothing. Because he was nothing to me now. And I was free.